Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast. This is Kisma, and today we have a very special guest. A guest that you probably would not have expected would be a guest on Illumination Podcast. And I'll share why in just a few moments. But today's episode is entitled The Mystic Next Door, a story of a healer coming out of the closet. Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
All right, I'm back. As you can notice, this is a slightly different beginning to Illumination Podcast, and here's why. The guest that I have today is the Mystic Next Door. And the Mystic Next Door is also very familiar to all of you as Nick, co-host of this podcast. But today he's a guest. So we're going to pull out some very interesting stories and why he's kind of been hiding the healer that he is and how he felt about some of the teachings and things that he knew and all of those things. So anyways, Nick, welcome to Illumination Podcast, or I should say the Mystic Next Door.
Oh,
welcome.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It's such a shock. So
I'm just cracking up while you.
I know. Because I'm like, this is odd. This is really odd. Where is he? He's right here. So, but no, everyone, it's like, I think it's really fun when we can look at how we take a journey in life. Everyone will do it differently. I mean, I know I've built like 3-4 businesses, and where I am now is what I'm doing. Nick's been through so many different iterations of his self. As I know many of you listening, we go through these different chapters, and sometimes they appear to be different characters, and oftentimes we'll shed beliefs and paradigms, and out comes a new human or not human. So I think it's going to be pretty cool to dissect and look at Nick's journey arriving to this whole Mystic Next Door persona.
Yeah. Remember when we first started the podcast, it was Kisma and the Dark Yogi.
He was the Dark Yogi.
Yeah. That wasn't as much of a fun. Like, I had fun with it, but in a sarcastic kind of way.
It was fun. And I think, it's sort of, we had to like get out of the dark stuff because we can't spend the podcast being sarcastic, although it was quite funny at times.
It was pretty funny at times.
So let's kind of start there. You transitioned out of the Dark Yogi.
Yeah. I mean, this is something, I think we've talked about this in other episodes as well. It's like, it's kind of an alter ego, in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Yogi was really just my attitude towards what I saw as a lot of things that were just really problematic in the yoga world.
Yeah.
Which is actually speaking directly to what we're talking about today, as far as like false spirituality, just misunderstandings and things that just really aren't helpful, or just like kind of focused on things that, in my humble and personal opinion, are not that important on the spiritual journey, like kind of like focused on the wrong things, so to speak, quote unquote wrong,
Yes.
And that's what the Dark Yogi was all about.
For the yoga world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now you're shining a light on the spiritual world, the energy world, the healer world, all of those things. And you've been in it for a while. You've sort of like, what I like about this is you've been observing a lot. And you've been doing a lot of work on yourself. You certainly work with people privately and in groups. So kind of give me an idea of like, what are those things that you've seen or saw that you were like, wait, this has got to change? With
respect to spirituality and mysticism?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're here in Southern California, in the mecca of some, spiritual communities and conscious communities and things of this nature. And I think that's awesome. First and foremost, I love that this is a conversation that's really coming out more and more. And it's not in the dogma of a religious context that can be really limiting. There's certain advantages to that, though. I actually believe that there are certain advantages to that. Some people may disagree with me. But I love, and when you look at like a spiritual, I guess how I would think about it is, it's like a religion is more, it's closed source. It's like an Apple, where it's like, okay, this is what you get, this is how it goes. Whereas, spirituality and those sorts of spiritual communities are more open source. It's kind of just, okay, here's your thing. And then you can do whatever you want with it, which has its own set of disadvantages. And it leaves a massive amount of room for people to just go off the rails in all different ways.
Yes.
And it lacks, and this is the part that, I don't want it to sound like oppressive, but it lacks discipline.
Correct. And a lot of times it does.
It does. And it's discipline is actually an incredibly important part of this whole thing. Discipline and personal responsibility. Two of the main, really powerful pillars of any spiritual practice.
Right.
Stay on the path and take responsibility for the path that you're on.
This is really good. Can you say that again?
Stay on the path and take responsibility for the path that you're on.
Good. So I want to insert, however, one of the reasons that we see many people meditating on the beach or doing their like vortex meditation downloads things here in Southern California is because whatever possible church temple experience they were part of, they felt stifled. They felt that there was too much discipline. It was a box.
That's a story I've heard so many times.
And I agree. I mean, having grown up in the Eastern Orthodox Church, there are parts about it that are so mystical and I love so much. And there are parts I was like, I'm not sure. But whatever, everyone has to choose what's right for them. I feel like what you're saying, and I know you and I have been studying this for years and had so many conversations, it's almost like we transcend the worldly aspects of quote unquote religion. And we're moving into a higher aspect, hence the mysticism of ourselves. And in order to do that, we need discipline.
Yes.
And we need accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's just like driving a car. If you're not accountable for where you're going, you will not get to where you want to go.
That's right.
Even if you have a driver, you got to tell the driver where you're going to go. Even if you have a self-driving Tesla, you got to tell the Tesla where you're going to go.
That's right.
You have to know where you want to go, and you've got to be accountable and disciplined to get there.
Yes. Yeah. All of those things are really important. Coming back to that, like I do want to speak to some of the advantages of religion is it gives you guidelines and you always know if you're going to live within the context of that religion and that belief system, you always know where you stand within it because it's clearly defined and it's clearly laid out.
Right.
So there's an advantage to that. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we're seeing, I think, in our culture at large that is, I just think, I don't want to say it's breaking down, but it's kind of like going through a reorganization where people are looking for answers to things that are actually unanswerable to the human mind.
This is so true.
Or they're just too big to comprehend.
Right.
They're just too big to comprehend, whether it's in a cultural context or whether it's in a spiritual context. It's like they're looking for the right answer. And when they're very, very uncomfortable not having an answer.
Right.
And so when somebody comes in with a clear answer for them, they'll grab onto it. And it's like, oh man, like I can tick that off the box. I've got the answer.
Yeah.
And that's that's where people get really stuck within the context of an organized religion is because then it's like, well, that becomes their every time answer and they don't need to question that. They don't need to investigate that any further.
Right.
And that's a stopping point. And that's the problem with it. So what it can do is really help to keep the guardrails on for people and really keep them in a track. It has no, what do I want to say? It's like that having that clear track can actually take you a long ways towards developing your own character and your sense of morals and things like that. And all those things are really valuable in your life. That's not where I'm headed.
Well, where are you headed?
Like, I want to know the mysteries. Like I want to, that's
you want to know the true teachings.
It's the true, not only the true teachings, but the highest level of those true teachings. And also like just like the mystery of the human experience. Like what the frick are we all doing here to begin with?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
Those things that they talk about in the Yoga Sutras and in the Vedas about like transcending this transcending this state of waking, dreaming, deep sleeping. They're saying there's a fourth state beyond that is absolute.
Yeah, the Turiya.
Right. But you can't, like, your human brain can't comprehend that. You have to have the experience.
You have to have the experience. So you're describing being a spiritual being in a physical body, in a human body. We are physical beings in a human body. And oftentimes we can get really caught up in just being human and in the human experience and all the attachments, all the distractions, all the frustrations, all the joys that come around with it. But what you're describing, Mystic Next Door, is transcending that.
Yes.
And when we are able to transcend that, again, it's not like even with the strongest of intellects, we cannot comprehend what self-realization is. We cannot really comprehend what God, universe, spirit, source is, yet we can certainly call upon it.
Yes.
We can invoke help. We can seek it again and again and again, and we can shed layers of beliefs and allow that to run through us and to us again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's like we can allow ourselves to be in like a cosmic dance with that.
Yeah.
In a fun and beautiful way. Like, that's miracles.
Mm-hmm.
There's miracles everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you want more miracles in your life, like, look for more miracles in your life.
Right.
It's that kind of thing.
It's right.
You know,
so true.
It's true, but miracles they're not outside the laws of nature. They're within the laws of nature. We just don't understand them. So we call it a miracle, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which is basically the entire human experience.
Exactly. And so many people have been brought up to believe that a miracle, it happens maybe once in a lifetime. So there is a misperception of breathing and eyesight and love and chakras and stratas, and we're just ignoring miracles everywhere.
Yeah, just waking up.
Waking up, getting out of bed is a miracle. So I love this conversation. Now, as I mentioned, you've been working many, many years on this. You do deep work with clients and you help them solve and resolve a lot of, would you say, limiting beliefs, congestion? How do you take this Mystic Next Door persona and help people?
Well, see, that's the interesting part. The next door part about it is actually really important because all of that we just talked about, like, it's really interesting on a conceptual level, on a philosophical level. I think it's fascinating.
Right.
You and I have spent hours and hours and hours talking about these things, but it doesn't seem practical.
Right.
It doesn't seem practical in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, Nick, that's really nice, but like, how is that going to help me?
Yeah. How is sitting on the beach meditating for 2 hours really going to help you and make a difference in the world?
Yeah. Or I just don't have time to do that.
Right.
Or like, okay, great. Like, I want to go for my my highest self, but I need to make some more money this month,
mm-hmm.
Or my relationship's falling apart and it's really painful for me. And I don't know what to do with that, or I'm having a really tough time parenting.
Right. All the things that show up in the human experience. And I remember in one of our trips to India to study, it was like the leaving that and going into some state of, whether it's meditation for real or not, or doing this, it can just be mental indulgence. It can be escapism.
It is. And that's false mysticism.
It's false mysticism. So talk a little bit more about this false mysticism, spiritual pride thing.
Yeah. And that it is an escape from the world, it becomes that. So what happens, this is how it comes, is people get overwhelmed in their lives and they think oftentimes that this path or the mysticism or spirituality, I don't mean to conflate the two. They're not exactly the same, but for now, mm-hmm. that's good enough. That it's really impractical.
Right.
I can't, like, this play, I'll get to it later because they're so absorbed with all of the little things in their lives and all this stuff. It's like, just keeping it running, man. Like, people got busy lives. We got a lot more going on than people did 100 years ago, or more. So keeping up with all of that, it's like they got all these other things and this gets pushed down the road. It's
right.
I'll get to it. And maybe they go on a retreat or they go on a, meditation retreat, or they go to a yoga retreat, or they just take a vacation or whatever. And it's like, well, that's their time to decompress. Mm-hmm. And that's it. It's all they get, because then they're back in it. And it just seems like so impractical.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that this is the most practical thing that you could ever do in your life, because it will radically change the experience of everything in your life.
Yes.
So everything is a relationship. Like it's your relationship to the world. It's your relationship to yourself.
Right.
And when you shift that part within you, then you shift your relationship with everything else. So you can go about and do the exact same things more or less in your world. You can have the same job. You can have the same relationship, the same kids, the same everything. And your experience of that can be radically different when you shift your perspective from within yourself.
Yes.
And so that's why this is the most practical thing that you could ever do.
Right.
Because it takes everything that you have and it puts it to a better use, and it helps you to have more happiness and more joy, and it helps you to reconnect to those higher parts of yourself that really keep you calling to that highest place. That place that's like, oh, I'll get to that later.
Right.
You know, like soul work, like really getting in my soul journey. Like I'll do that later. Like I can't afford to do that right now. It just doesn't make sense. No,
right.
I'll do that later. No, do that now, because it's going to change everything down the road.
It really does make everything more magnificent.
It does.
And we see this, when we look at very successful, well-known people, there's a reason they're out searching. We see it again and again. Right. I mean, Oprah was at Ananda Spa, where we ended up going once in India to study Vedanta. Like, they show up. It's not work it's work when done well allows everything else to flow more smoothly.
That's right. And so how the other starts to arise, in my experience, is the false mysticism I'm referring to, is people get so entangled in their lives. I've been there. I mean, I know it's like you're just down in the weeds with everything. And it's like, oh man, I just need a total change.
Right.
Right. So that's where it's like, oh, I'm going to go do a plant medicine retreat, or I'm going to go do a 10-day sit. It sounds so exciting.
Yeah.
It's so peaceful to not have to talk to anybody for 10 days, right? Whatever these things. So they do that. They feel a little bit better. And it's like, oh, well, that becomes the thing. Right. But then there's an elevated, they've purged out a lot of things from their system, and they feel better for a minute, but none of the stuff actually got resolved. So they go back into their lives. They have a little bit of a different perspective, but they don't really they haven't built it in a way that allows them to integrate that into their lives so that it's actually sustainable.
And they can shift it in real time.
That's right.
That's the key, being able to shift that in real time. And when the spiritual tap isn't turned on in a way where you've got this information or this true knowledge, it's just will end up attracting the same old stuff again. Maybe a little bit less of it, right? You feel better, go longer. It's just like a detox. We've really got to do the internal shift.
It has to be about the the deep internal shift, right? In a very tangible way, and that doesn't have to be. So this is an important part, because a lot of times people think like, oh, the deep stuff. Like, I'm going to get deep into it, and they're just like, I'm going through a death cycle right now, or like, I've heard so many people talk about just really trying times, or they get into the drama of the spiritual path of like, oh, that, you say yes to something, and then it's like the universe is throwing all these tests my way. And it's like, dude, that doesn't have to be that hard.
It does not have to be that hard.
Unless you set it up to be that hard. And if you want to know what that sounds like go listen to the last episode.
Right, of cheese.
About my journey with cheese. Cause that's, but I set it up to be hard.
Right.
That's the funny thing.
Right.
So there's that part, and it gets into the escapism.
Right.
So then it becomes like, oh, well, I just need to get out of this. I need to extract myself from this world so that I can escape and like go get back into this other part of myself, which on its surface seems like a great idea.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's bad, like don't do it. What I'm saying is it's not really the fastest track there or the easiest one. And it's actually making your internal disposition dependent on your external circumstances.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Which is always a problem.
Yeah, tell me about that. Why?
Whoa, okay. Well, anybody can go to a really beautiful place that's quiet and have peace.
It's true.
Anybody can do that.
Sit quietly on the beach and feel really good.
Yeah.
Just about anybody could do that.
The real challenge is when everything is swirling around you and you're in the world with #humans doing very human-y things and navigating all of that and keeping your cool.
Right.
Staying kind.
The challenge then, what you're saying is having a peaceful mind in a chaotic world is really the ultimate.
A peaceful mind no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
Whether the world's calm, peaceful, whatever, people agree with you, don't agree with you.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. And that's, let me back up for a second, because that's not really fair for me to say that anybody can go into those circumstances and feel peaceful. That's actually not true.
Yeah, there are going to be some people that can't.
Yeah, there's people that go into those, they go sit on a beach and they brood in their mind and spin around in their mind, and they're just as miserable there. They treat the staff horribly. At the places, they treat other people they're just doing the exact same thing in a really beautiful place.
Right. Exactly. They haven't transcended.
You're the common denominator. You're always going to take you with you.
Yeah. So we've got to clean up you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And when you do that, everything else changes. It's like nothing is different, or nothing changes, but everything is different.
That's really good. And so the next door part that you're referring to, it's like, you don't have to wear robes. You don't have to go to India. You don't have to wear mala beads. I mean, you can do all that if you want. You don't have to have tattoos. You don't have to pierce everything. You can do that if you want. You can be you. You can look like everybody else. You can operate in a world and fit in and not fit in a really cool way.
Totally. For me, it's like, yeah, it is very much be who you are.
Right.
And I feel like there's a casual approach to this that allows it to come into your life in a much more meaningful way for you.
Right. Right. Got it. Okay.
You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't have to be this super deep, serious, heavy thing all the time. Like, we can have fun.
Right.
And laid back. And, I think that's one of my favorite parts about, working with people individually is allowing that to unfold. And yeah, like, you can ask any of my clients, like, we get to some deep stuff that is very revealing in different ways and makes massive changes in their lives. But at the same time, we're having fun doing it. We're having conversations that are relevant in their world, that aren't just like, trying to teach something that doesn't mean anything.
Got it. It's like there can be this element of joy and possibility throughout the deep work.
Yeah. There truly can. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's to me, that's what the Mystic Next Door stands for.
Right. And you can, again, you can be that person that doesn't have to be whatever, living in a cave or doing whatever, that you can be in the world and you can have these exalted qualities.
Yeah.
And you can live in that way that you're not as affected by the world as maybe you once were.
Yeah. I mean, just think if you were 2% less affected by the world.
It's pretty big. That would add up.
It's actually really big. Yeah. What seems like a little shift is an incredible stride in your own development and beyond your own development. If you're just not into that of like, well, I don't really care about that. I just want to have a happier life. That's fine too.
Right.
That's very next door.
Exactly.
That's very, very much, very practical. And that's absolutely beautiful. But think about what's possible from that place is, you're 2% less affected by the world. And that's, 2 times out of 100 that somebody's going to say something to you and you're going to have a much more beautiful reaction to it and a helpful reaction to it or a kind reaction to it than you would have before.
Totally.
And any one of those, just by the way, like any one of those can take you down in an instant when you make a choice or you get involved with something that's really not for your highest and best. And then you go down that path, like that can have a huge impact in your life.
It really can. It can tip everything.
Yeah. So that 2% can save you literally months of digging out of a hole.
So this is where we look at that, having accountability for our own lives, our own choices, our own triggers, our own reactions. I mean, to me, it's like this very deep self-awareness and a very focused presence so that as things are happening, if we feel that trigger, we feel something getting erupted internally, we're more poised to look at it and understand what's behind it rather than react to the world in a way that we might be sorry we did.
Yeah.
I think through the Vedanta teachings we studied, it was receipt, reaction, response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it seems to me like you're describing this mystical attitude of responding to the world, to self, to the world, to others from a higher aspect of being.
Yeah, it's really responding to it from the highest aspects of yourself.
Right.
That part of you. And I there's all different levels and layers in there. But if you just really go to whatever the highest is that you conceive, that's going to be a much more objective part of yourself. It's basically like your best self.
Right.
This is something we've talked about a lot of times.
For sure.
It's that best, if it's you more loving and kind and joyful and happy and all these amazing things, like it's coming from that place.
Right.
It's like, okay, is your very best self gonna respond in anger and derision and all these things, or is your best self like going to be
in observation
and
witness
and looking for the higher path,
right.
looking to bring everybody to the higher path, a true sense of leadership.
Right. Exactly. I love that. So when you came up with this, it's a little bit of a personal brand. You can find the Mystic Next Door on Instagram. You'll see Nick's posts on Facebook. Like there was a coming out of the closet.
Oh, for sure.
For you. Can you talk a little bit about why it was, or was it uncomfortable, or what happened? You're like, all right, I need to be front and center. I just simply need to show this more about myself.
When the Mystic landed, then that was kind of like my permission slip. It was before that, because what had happened over the longer term is, I've been working with people for years. In different ways and, coaching and mentoring and all kinds of stuff. And when we started Energy Mastery, Siobhan and we started Energy Mastery, I had kind of gotten away from that. I wasn't working with people as individuals. I was really focused on, building that brand and that business, which I am still very much so. It's very important to me. But I had been missing a lot, like really just working with people individually. It's one of my favorite things to do. And it's actually one of my superpowers. I'm very good at it. Yeah. I mean, because I love it so much.
You are really good. You're one of the best healers on the planet.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I go that far, but I'll take it. I will receive that.
You should receive that. I want you to see that.
I will absolutely receive that. So I was thinking about like, well, am I a healer? Kinda. I mean, I do healing work. Kinda. I'm not really doing it. More like I think of myself as more of a vessel for it. So it's like, there's a lot of like murky areas in that for me of like, how do I really own this? And I don't want to own it and I want people to get the wrong idea about it, that it's like super woo woo and out there, and that it doesn't, that it's purely mystical in that way, in that it's not practical in their lives. And so, I was just having a tough time kind of expressing that or really owning that and not knowing really how to talk about it at all. And when I was it was while you were away, if you remember, when it really landed, I was hanging out with some friends and it was just like, oh, the Mystic Next Door, for various reasons. It just really suited who I am. And that was my permission slip.
That was it. They were like, of course, that's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody that's seen it, I can't tell you how many messages I've got people grabbing me aside and they're like, oh, dude, I saw that you started using that Mystic Next Door. That's so you. That's so awesome. And I was like, yeah, that's so cool. But it was basically my permission slip to step into this in my own, unique way, because the work that I do with people is extremely practical. It is holistic healing in the truest sense, in that it's not just about one thing or one area. It's not just about physical stuff. It's not just about mental and emotional stuff. It's not just about your relationships. Or just about your money. It's not just about, your spirituality. It's all of those things have to be addressed.
Right.
In order for real, true transformation to occur. Yeah,
this is very true. We can't have something broken and expect to be the best version of ourselves.
That's true. And one of the most common examples that we'll see of that is where somebody is really deep into their spiritual work, or they get really deep into their spiritual work, and then their money breaks.
Yeah.
So they either lose it or they give it up, which is something
false
that we've
renunciation.
Seen a lot. They'll give it up and they'll just think, oh, that doesn't matter. It doesn't, it's not part of it and everything.
Yeah.
And then that part of their life breaks.
Right.
And it just causes all kinds of problems. It's not a true transformation.
Exactly.
You're still in that same game. It has to all work together in order for the true transformation to occur.
Yeah. I love that. I want to share a little bit too. The mysticism that many of us think about is can seem a bit woo, but yet it's really about reaching, accessing, learning, studying those higher spiritual teachings, the highest version of us. Yes, some people, such as yourself, will have certain gifts more prominent, yet it's about getting clear. It's about understanding technology that is in alignment with this high way of being.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody can, for instance, go to you and understand this or learn this or develop this to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. The misunderstanding, I think, a lot of times is that there's a formula, like here's your 5-step formula to get there. Now there are certain guidelines to it, of course, and it will fit within that context. But every person has their unique path there.
They really do. This is so important.
And that's why I'm so passionate about the personal work.
Yeah.
Both on myself, but also when working with clients. Like I'm so passionate about it because it's really about helping them to find their way there, rather, and their language around it and how it relates in their life, so that as it integrates, it does it in a much more natural way that just feels really good and fun and meaningful in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just think that's super, super important. It's like systems are important.
And technology is important.
The technology is extremely important because that helps you stay the path.
Right. And discipline's important. It helps you stay the path. And within all of that, everyone is this unique iteration.
Yeah. Because it is about, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And in order to go the distance, you do require the support along the way, and it requires the systems, and it really requires a sustainability in the way that you approach it. Otherwise, it just spins out, and then you're in this super up and down cycle that's just no fun.
Yeah.
So that's where all those pieces become, very, very important in order to really get to the highest. It has to be done in a sustainable way.
Yes.
And in order to do that, it has to be resetting the foundation.
Yeah.
And then building from there.
Right. I love it. So the mystic next door, coming out of the closet, when you started to, because Nick's just FYI, you guys have heard him on the podcast, he does energy mastery, he does coaching and healing. You're not the most front and center on social media that many entrepreneurs, coaches, healers are.
I'm working on it.
You're working on it. You're doing great.
I do what you tell me most of the time.
Yeah. And this mystic next door, I felt it sort of gave you this presence that you embraced, sort of like that alter ego effect we were talking about.
Yeah.
What went through, like, oh man, who's going to judge me? Did you have to go through that, or did you just do enough work? You're like, yep, I'm out. Like, I'm out of the closet, guys. Think what you want, say what you want. I don't care.
Well, it's really funny. He's my permission slip. So when I started that, as soon as I started using it, I was like, oh, we're good.
You were good.
Yeah.
It was really an alignment vessel.
Yeah. I can just say, I can speak it from a container that is a little, that is that part of myself. So it's like it's an alter ego that really represents the highest aspects of me as best as I'm able, know, and I'm just FYI, everybody. Number one, I don't assume that I'm there by any stretch, and just go back and listen to the last episode. So I don't assume that at all, and I don't want to pretend to be in that ultimate state. Like, this is a journey. I'm on the journey too, and I really do want to approach it with humility and integrity. And I think that's important, so.
You do that really well. I mean, like, we know from our many, many years of going to India and studying with an amazing guru, is for all of you, whether you do any of our courses, trainings, or work, or someone else's, be very cautious of anyone who says, I'm it.
That's how you know they're not.
That's how, because anyone that is that's their conversation is not around themselves being it. Their conversation is around, how can I make an impact for people to be happier, to be more enlightened, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating. So how about, for our listeners, a couple of 1, 2, 3 tips on stepping into this version of mysticism for them, sort of the mysticism next door?
the mystic it represents that for people in a practical, I don't know, I keep using that word practical. I don't know that that's my favorite word, but it keeps coming out. In a very usable way in their lives. You know, it represents something that's down to earth. That's very much
something they don't have to hide.
Yeah. And you don't have to hide. Like you can just be who you are and be that beautiful version of yourself, in so many different ways. With that in mind, it is in so many ways about the little things and the little choices that we make.
Right.
The little things that we do. So tips as far as getting into that is just sit there with your eyes closed for a few minutes, let yourself relax, you know, take a couple deep breaths and just imagine what yourself is like when you're at your very best.
That's a great exercise.
It's profound.
Imagine what yourself is like when you're at your very best.
Yeah. Maybe you see a version of that.
Right.
You know, how is he or she dressed? What, you know, maybe there's that part of it. You know, like how do they look? How do they stand?
Treat people? How do you treat people? How do you receive? Like all those things. That's really that's so good.
Yeah. It's in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Isn't that where he talks about, well, how does this,
how does
talk about
sit?
The enlightened soul? Like, how does they sit? Like,
how do they talk? Sit? How do they be? Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like that in just a really simple way is just sit and imagine that very best version of yourself. And it's super powerful.
Right.
And then go be that. So don't try to be that in everything, like right off the bat and like overwhelm yourself and like push yourself, you know, like into, you know, trying to just do it in little ways.
Do it in little ways that pop up.
Yeah.
It's helpful to write about it. It's helpful to describe it to yourself in a journal.
Yeah. It's like what you always talk about with the manifesting of how you hold that vision of
it is a vision. Yeah.
Well, this is a different kind of manifestation in a certain way because you're manifesting a different part of yourself, a higher part of yourself. And so it's not just a one and done, like, oh yeah, we did that, you know, we're good. It's something that you continue to cultivate for yourself. And that really and truly in a very simple way, like that's kind of the mystic path. It's like, I want to live in that place.
Right.
And for me, I can say like, well, that's the Nick who, when somebody goes off, you know, or just does something really weird in my world, that is greeting that with kindness.
Yeah.
You know, in my heart, you know, I'm going to do what's appropriate on the external, but in my heart, it's like kindness and compassion.
Yeah.
And at the same time is willing to look at himself and say, like that's showing up in my world. I wonder how that got there.
Exactly.
Right. That those two things go hand in hand.
Right.
You know, you talk about the 3 spiritual disciplines. This is something that I really adhere to. It's, knowledge. You know, so that's that little bit of study that you do every day of yourself.
Putting into your mind, into your brain, something that's higher.
That's right. And that's one form of it is just to sit there and cultivate a vision of your best self.
Yeah.
Because you're putting something in there, or really, I guess in a certain sense, really drawing something out of there. But regardless, you're analyzing of yourself and allowing those higher qualities to develop and manifest.
Yes.
That's one. And what does that do? That's the shield. It allows you to, it protects you from the knocks and shocks of the world, as Swamiji would put it.
Yeah.
It's a protective quality because when you have that higher knowledge of yourself, you know that there's a certain part, not in an egotistical way that you're above, but that you can just float above.
It's really important.
Yeah.
I love that.
Faith is the next part of that. And whatever that means to you, that doesn't mean blind faith. What it means is, it just means living in the miracle.
Yeah.
The miracle that we don't really understand about really, truly the most basic aspects of ourselves.
So true.
In our human experience. We just have no idea, but it's living in faith that these things are manifesting and that we are not just a victim of it, but a co-creator in this path and really taking responsibility for ourselves in order to do that. And having the faith, that's the faith part is like having faith that, yes, I can keep doing that and it will lead me to the higher ground.
Right.
And I'm getting feedback every step of the way. And the sword, like that's the cross, but the sword is the action. You have to take action in the world.
Dynamic action, consistent action.
Right action of service, you know.
Right.
And not to get super off on a weird word, but sacrificing yourself within that, not in like a detrimental kind of way, but it's like sacrificing the ego. It's coming to it really cleanly. It's coming to that from that place of true service and giving. in the highest way possible,
Right.
and taking dynamic action in the world. So that's where you see the false mysticism of, I'm just going to go live in a cave, or I'm just going to play smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. The escapism around it. Or that idea that, oh, well, my soul just wants me to play. No, like your soul does not want you to shrink. Your soul is life, and life is naturally expansive.
It is. So, you know, with that principle of life force, all expansion, creating what you've shared today of how this internal conversation and internal work really creates a different external world, and our ability to manage this world in ways that are magnificent rather than stressful, anxiety-ridden struggle. I loved your tips. You also mentioned before we got on the air that you had some space to offer up a few free energetic alignment sessions. Can you tell our listeners about that and how they might sign up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. An energetic alignment session is really simple. It's basically an opportunity to really get aligned with what you want in your life. And that happens on an energetic level. So I have a little process that I take people through. It's really powerful, actually, to help you get aligned with that, get clear and aligned with your true goal.
Yeah.
You know, which is not always, I think sometimes that
sometimes we don't know what it is.
Immediately aware of. Yeah.
So you help them get to what they really want.
Yeah.
And if they're in alignment, and if they're not, and there's something you can do to support them, maybe it's a small meditation, maybe it's coaching or energy, you'll share that on the call. But basically they get on to be able to look at, are they in alignment?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what are the next best steps in order for them to get there in the best possible way?
Good.
You know?
So I know you're busy. I know you have just a few slots for that, but how can our listeners approach that and get connected with you?
Well, the easiest way is if you go to nickhansinger.net/apply.
Okay.
And all that is just a little form that is there to just get the ball rolling. And then there's next steps to schedule from there. So it's nickhansinger.net/apply.
Great. We'll put that in our show notes as well. But go there if you're interested in talking with Nick. It's such a gift, for him to give you that space and an assessment, nickhansinger.net/apply. And just to get a feel, where your soul's buzzing.
Yeah.
Where your humans running and humming, and, possibly how to make it all be more mystical and magical.
Yeah. I love, that's the whole thing. That's why I love the mystic so much. It's it really is about magic. It's bringing magic into your life. We're not going to geek out on that right now.
Another episode on magic.
Yeah. But I think that's that's a great way in. If you just want to, if you haven't followed or been familiar, go follow my personal Facebook page. That's right now. That's where I'm kind of sharing. You'll see, I'm writing more, which is really fun.
Doing some videos.
Yeah, doing a little bit more videos. Thanks to the Kisma, everybody.
Yeah. Instagram is the Mystic Next Door.
The Instagram's fun, and then I do have a group actually called Enlightened Living. And if you look that up, that's in
Facebook.
In Facebook, that's a cool place to connect as well.
We'll put that in the show notes too.
The easiest and most direct path: nickhansinger.net/apply.
Cool. I love that. And hopefully for all of you listening, number one, thank you for being here. We love you so much. And number two, my wish is that just hearing Nick talk about this at a deeper level, you begin to have more of that mysticism, more of that higher self, more of that joy and blessing and transcendence in your life, because it really is so much easier to live and so much more fun to be from that place. So thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Namaste.
Peace. Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.